You know, folks say that in Texas, the only thing we value more than our barbecue is our boundaries. We don't do committees, we don't do suggestions about how to cut our grass, and we absolutely do not negotiate with people who think a property line is just a suggestion. I gave them a chance. I gave them the polite no, the firm get off my land, and even the silence that usually tells a smart man he's walking into a rattlesnake den. But the Oak Creek Preserve Homeowners Association wasn't smart. They were arrogant. And arrogance is a dangerous thing to bring to a gunfight, even if the only gun involved is a camera lens and a whole lot of patience. See, the night it all ended, it didn't look like a victory. It looked like three men in crisp polo shirts freezing like raccoons in a trash can when I hit the floodlights. They were standing at the edge of my stock pond, holding bags of industrial-grade fertilizer, ready to dump enough nitrates into that water to kill every fish, frog, and cow that drank from it. They thought they were being stealthy. They thought the dark would hide them. But they forgot that darkness is where a rancher lives. I stood on the porch, racked a shell into my grandfather's Mossberg, not to shoot, just to let the sound do the talking, and watch their little world crumble. But to understand why three grown men were trying to poison a pond at 2 in the morning, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to when the first clipboard crossed my fence. My name is Caleb Boone, and I own the Ironwood Ranch. It's not a hobby farm. It's not a tax write-off. It's 300 acres of scrub oak, limestone, and hard work that my family has bled into since 1952. My daddy taught me that land isn't just dirt. It's a bank vault for your memories. Every dent in the old barn door is a story. Every bent fence post is a lesson. When I look out at that horizon, I don't see potential development zones. I see the place where I learned to walk, where I buried my parents, and where I plan to take my last breath. But about 5 years ago, the city started creeping closer. It started with a gas station, then a strip mall, and then, inevitably, Oak Creek Preserve. It rose up on the eastern border of my property like a bad rash, row after row of identical beige houses with manicured lawns that have no business existing in this climate. They put up a big stone gate, hired a security guard who looked like he failed mall cop school, and slapped a homeowners association on it that operated with the intensity of a secret police force. For the first few years, we ignored each other. I stayed on my side of the barbed wire. They stayed on theirs. But then, Patricia Vance got elected HOA president. Patricia was, well, she was a piece of work. Imagine a woman who smiles with her mouth, but her eyes are calculating your liquidation value. She drove a white luxury SUV that never had a speck of dust on it, and she walked like she was inspecting the world for flaws. The first time we met, I was fixing a gap in the east fence where a sounder of hogs had pushed through. I heard a throat clear behind me. That sharp, performative ahem that demands attention. I turned around, tipping my hat back. There stood Patricia, flanked by a guy holding a tablet like it was the 10 Commandments. "Good morning," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that usually precedes an insult. "I'm Patricia Vance, president of the Oak Creek Board. We haven't officially met." "Caleb," I said, turning back to my wire. "And you're standing in a fire ant hill, ma'am." She jumped back, swatting at her ankles, and I suppressed a grin. "Mr. Boone." She recovered, straightening her blazer. "We need to talk about your visual impact. Our residents pay a premium for their views, and frankly, this." She gestured vaguely at my barn, my truck, and my existence, "is not consistent with the aesthetic of Oak Creek." I leaned on my pliers. "Well, ma'am, this ranch was here when that subdivision was just a gleam in a developer's eye. My aesthetic is called agriculture. It feeds people. It's messy," she snapped. "And we have plans. We're petitioning the county to rezone the buffer areas. We'd like you to consider selling. We have a developer ready to offer you a fair market price to relocate." "Relocate?" I laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. "My grandfather is buried under that oak tree on the ridge. You want me to relocate him too?" Her eyes went cold. "Progress happens, Mr. Boone. You can either be part of the solution, or you can be the debris we clear away. We have very strict bylaws regarding nuisance properties adjacent to our community." "Your bylaws stop at that fence," I said, pointing a gloved finger. "Now, unless you want to help me stretch this wire, you're trespassing." She didn't storm off. That would have been too human. She just gave me a thin, tight nod, made a note on her phone, and walked away. But as she left, She looked back at my land not with anger, but with hunger. That's when I knew. This wasn't a neighborly dispute. This was a siege. The escalation was slow at first, almost imperceptible. It started with drones. I'd be out checking the herd in the evening, enjoying the sunset, and I'd hear that high-pitched whine. I'd look up and see a quadcopter hovering right over my property line, camera lens pointed at my barn, my house, my water tanks. It felt like being a bug under a microscope. I didn't shoot it down. That's a felony, and they knew I knew that. But I did start carrying a high-powered laser pointer. One flash across the sensor usually sent them scurrying home. Then came the official complaints. I got a letter from the county citing unauthorized debris. I went out to the back pasture and found a pile of old tires and drywall that hadn't been there the day before. Someone had driven up to my back gate, tossed it over, and then reported me. I cleaned it up, seething. A week later, animal control showed up. We got a report of starving cattle. The officer said, looking embarrassed. He took one look at my herd, fat, happy, and slick-coated, and shook his head. Sorry to bother you, Caleb. We have to follow up on every call. The lady was pretty insistent. Patricia? I asked. He just nodded. She sent photos. Taken from a drone, looked like. Showed a skinny cow. But looking at your herd, these aren't even the same breed. She was manufacturing evidence. Photoshopping, maybe, or just finding pictures of sick cows online and claiming they were mine. It was a low tactic, but it told me she was getting desperate. She wanted to create a paper trail of negligence so she could pressure the county into condemning the land or forcing a sale. But the breaking point, the moment I stopped playing defense and started playing offense, was the day the man in the suit showed up. His name was Sterling, or something equally polished. He drove a sports car up my gravel road, wincing every time a rock hit his undercarriage. He got out, handed me a business card that felt heavier than a playing card, and smiled. Mr. Boone, he said, I represent a consortium working with Oak Creek. We know you've had some legal troubles lately. The tires, the animal welfare checks. It's stressful, isn't it? Managing all this land alone. I manage just fine, I said. We're prepared to offer you 20% above the tax assessment, he said, sliding a folder across the hood of his car. Cash. You could move to Florida. No fences to fix. No HOAs to fight. And what happens to the land? I asked, though I already knew. Oh, it's a beautiful vision, he beamed. Phase 2 of Oak Creek. Luxury condos, a golf course where your pond is. We'll keep the old barn, turn it into a clubhouse. Very rustic chic. Turn my grandfather's barn into a clubhouse for people who've never held a hammer. The rage that hit me was so hot it felt like I'd swallowed a coal, but I kept my face stone still. Get off my land, I said quietly. Mr. Boone, be reasonable. Mrs. Vance is very determined. She mentioned that if you don't sell, the HOA might have to get the EPA involved regarding your water runoff. That can be ruinously expensive. There it was. The threat. Sell, or we will bury you in federal fines. I watched him drive away, and I realized they weren't going to stop. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an obstacle. A stump to be pulled. And you don't reason with a stump puller. You break the machine. That night, I sat on the porch with a bottle of whiskey and a notepad, and I started planning. My daddy always said, if you want to catch a coyote, you don't chase him. You make him think he's found an easy meal. Step 1 was the bait. I went out to the pasture closest to the subdivision, the one visible from Patricia's back deck. I took my tractor and dug 3 jagged, ugly trenches. I piled the dirt high. Then, I went to the hardware store and bought some ominous-looking yellow signs. I weathered them a bit with sandpaper and stuck them in the dirt. They didn't say anything illegal. They just said, caution, soil treatment area, do not enter. Then, I bought the cameras. Not the cheap ones. I bought high-definition, night vision trail cams with cellular uplinks. I hid them everywhere. In the mesquite trees, inside an old hollow fence post, even one disguised as a rock. I pointed them at the trenches, at the gates, and specifically at the creek bed that ran between my land and theirs. I waited. It took 3 days. My phone buzzed at 1 a.m. Motion detected, camera 4. I opened the app and watched, live, as 2 figures in dark clothes hopped my fence. They crept toward the soil treatment signs. They had shovels. They started digging, taking samples of the dirt. I let them dig. I let them bag up the soil. I knew what they'd find. Absolutely nothing but good Texas earth. But the fact that they were there, trespassing, taking samples to try and frame me for some environmental crime? That was the first nail in their coffin. But the real break came from an unexpected source. A week later, I was at the feed store in town, loading sacks of cubes, when a young guy approached me. He looked nervous, kept checking over his shoulder. "Mr. Boone," he asked. "I'm Leo. I live in Oak Creek, 3 streets over from the gate." I stiffened. "I got nothing to say to you folks." "I know," he said quickly, "and I don't blame you. But, look, not everyone there is like Patricia. She's a nightmare. She fined me $300 last week because my garage door was open for 20 minutes while I was washing my car." I softened a bit. "Sounds like her." "I'm on the email list for the neighborhood watch," Leo whispered. "It's not a watch, sir. It's a surveillance ring. They talk about you. A lot. And I saw an email yesterday that scared me." He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. It was from Patricia to the board members. The subject line was "Resolution of the Boone Issue." The text read, "If he refuses the buyout, we need to accelerate the environmental leverage. We need proof that his water sources are contaminated. If they aren't contaminated yet, we need to ensure the next testing cycle shows high nitrate levels. I have acquired the necessary supplies." I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of holding a smoking gun. "Can you send this to me?" I asked Leo. "I can," he said, "but you have to promise to burn them down. She's terrorizing us too. We just want to live in our houses without being spied on." "Son," I said, clapping a hand on his shoulder, "I'm about to light a fire you'll be able to see from space." I took that email straight to Sheriff Miller. Miller is an old-school lawman, the kind who still wears a white hat and means it. We've known each other for 30 years. He looked at the email, looked at the footage of the trespassers digging in my field, and his jaw set hard. "This is conspiracy, Caleb," Miller said. "And if they actually try to tamper with your water? That's a felony. That's federal." "She said she has the supplies," I told him. "She's going to make a move soon. The EPA testing is scheduled for next week. She needs the water to run hot by then." Miller nodded. "We'll be ready. You keep those cameras rolling. If anyone crosses that fence line, you call me. Don't engage unless you have to." "I won't engage," I promised. "I'll just turn on the lights." The night of the reckoning felt heavy. The air was thick, humid, the kind of night where sound carries forever. I was sitting in the dark on my porch, shotgun across my lap, watching the monitors on my iPad. 1:45 a.m. Silence. 2:15 a.m. A coyote howled. 2:42 a.m. Movement. 3 figures. They didn't come over the fence this time. They cut the lock on the back gate. They were carrying heavy sacks over their shoulders. They moved awkwardly, stumbling in the dark, heading straight for the main stock pond, the one my cattle drink from every day. I watched them on the screen. They reached the bank. They set the bags down. One of them pulled out a knife to slit the bag open. I hit the button. The floodlights I had rigged up in the oak trees slammed on. 10,000 lumens of LED daylight flooded the pond. The men froze. It was comical, almost cartoonish. One guy dropped his knife. Another threw his hands up like he was under arrest already. The third one, the one I recognized as Sterling, the developer, just looked at the ground. I stepped off the porch and keyed the mic for the PA system I'd installed. My voice boomed across the pasture, amplified and echoing. "Step away from the water, gentlemen." They spun around, squinting into the glare. "You are trespassing on private property," I announced, walking toward them, my shadow stretching long across the grass. "And you are being recorded." "Run," one of them yelled. "I wouldn't," came a voice from the darkness to their right. Sheriff Miller stepped out from the brush, his service weapon drawn but low. 2 deputies flanked him. "Deputies, secure them." It was over in seconds. The bags were seized as evidence. It was high-concentrate nitrate fertilizer, enough to turn that pond into a toxic algae bloom within days, killing the fish and making the water test off the charts for agricultural runoff pollution. It was a frame job, plain and simple. But the night wasn't done. Miller looked at the handcuffed men. "Who sent you?" Sterling, sweating through his expensive shirt, didn't hesitate. He knew the ship was sinking. "Patricia," he spit out. "Patricia Vance. She said it was the only way to force the sale. She's waiting in her car at the gate." Miller looked at me. "You want to come along for the ride, Caleb? I wouldn't miss it." We drove down to the main gate of Oak Creek. Sure enough, the white SUV was idling there, lights off. Patricia was waiting for her soldiers to return with the news that the deed was done. Instead, she got a cruiser pulling up to her bumper, lights flashing blue and red. I watched from Miller's passenger seat as he tapped on her window. She rolled it down, looking annoyed, expecting maybe a security guard. When she saw the sheriff, her face went the color of cottage cheese. "Mrs. Vance," Miller said, "step out of the vehicle." I'm just waiting for a friend," she stammered. "Your friends are currently in handcuffs for attempted environmental tampering and criminal trespass," Miller said. "And they're singing like canaries. They say you orchestrated the whole thing." "That's a lie," she shrieked. "I'm the president. You can't touch me." "I'm touching you," Miller said, opening the door. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." As they cuffed her, I stepped out of the truck. She looked at me, her eyes wild, hair coming undone. "You," she screamed. "You ruin everything. You selfish old man. That land is wasted on you." "It's not wasted, Patricia," I said calmly. "It's cherished. There's a difference." The fallout was spectacular. The next morning, the story hit the local news. HOA president arrested in plot to poison rancher's water. The video footage from my trail cams, of the men cutting the fence, carrying the bags, the confrontation, it was everywhere. The Oak Creek residents, led by Leo, revolted. They called an emergency meeting, not to find me, but to oust the entire board. It turns out Patricia had been embezzling funds too, using HOA dues to pay Sterling's consulting fees to try and steal my land. Patricia is currently awaiting trial on multiple felony counts, including conspiracy and environmental crimes. She's looking at 5 to 10 years. The developer turned state's evidence to save his own skin. But the best part happened a week later. I was fixing the fence, the one they had cut, when a car pulled up. It was Leo and a few other neighbors from the subdivision. They got out, looking sheepish. "Mr. Boone," Leo said, we wanted to apologize. We didn't know how bad it was. We brought you something." He handed me a bottle of good bourbon and a pie. "We dissolved the preservation committee," a woman said, "and we voted to officially recognize your property boundaries and exempt you from any future visual compliance complaints. We just want to be good neighbors." I looked at them. They were just people. People who had been led by a tyrant, sure, but people who were waking up. "Well," I said, taking the bottle, "I appreciate that. Just keep your drones on your side of the line, all right?" They laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but it was real. I'm sitting on my porch right now. The sun is going down, painting the sky in purples and oranges that you can't buy in a paint store. The cattle are lowing in the distance. The pond is clear and clean, reflecting the first stars of the evening. I won. But I didn't win because I was stronger or richer. I won because I knew what I was fighting for. They were fighting for an aesthetic, for a profit margin, for control. I was fighting for home. And let me tell you something, friends. When you fight for your home, for the dirt that raised you, you don't fight fair. You fight to win. So, here's my question for you. What is your line in the sand? What is the thing you would stand on a porch in the dark and defend against the world? Because everyone has one. If you don't know what yours is yet, you'd better figure it out before the clipboard brigade shows up at your fence. Let me know in the comments. I read them all. And if you enjoyed watching a bunch of corporate bullies get dragged out of the mud in handcuffs, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that we still care about the little guy out here. I'm Caleb Boone. This is the Ironwood Ranch. And the gate is locked. Thanks for listening.